I'm not completely sure what to say about the Philadelphia 76ers anymore, but I do know that there's a lot of stuff I'm going to say in this video. So, before we get into that, welcome to the first episode of Jump Ball, your new daily dose of NBA news and opinions. I am your host, Sam Conrad. Let's get into this one. There's a lot of stuff to dissect here, so we'll try to get through it as fast as possible. But the first thing I want to talk about is the Philadelphia 76ers offseason, because here's the thing. There's actually a good amount of teams that are now contending in the Eastern Conference this year that are, obviously very, very good and trying to win right now. And the other four teams that I'm going to be talking about today all did get better this offseason, but the 76ers didn't. Maybe they've stayed the same, although I think even that's kind of a stretch. I'm not a huge fan of this 76ers team. They're just not good. We'll talk about them a little bit later, but let's go over the other four teams really quickly here. So first team that we'll start with is going to be the reigning champion Milwaukee Bucks. Now, they did lose PJ Tucker, who was a pretty big part of this organization in their title run, but they did manage to re-sign Bobby Portis, who's also a huge contributor to this team off of the bench, a fantastic backup big man. They also managed to sign George Hill, which is a huge signing, a fantastic backup point guard. Dante DiVincenzo will be back from his injury next season at some point, we hope, right? A fantastic defensive piece off of the bench and can provide some floor spacing and get you a couple of buckets as well. They also grabbed Grayson Allen in free agency and made a huge low risk, high reward play by signing Rodney Hood to an extremely, in my opinion, small deal. I believe it's only like $3 million, maybe $6 million at the most. And regardless, if he can get anywhere near his production before his big, I believe it was an ACL tear, that's going to be a huge steal. Even if whether it's $3 million or $6 million, it really doesn't matter. He was quite the productive player before his injury. And at the end of the day, if he isn't productive whatsoever, it's not that big of a deal because he's not taking up much cap space. And I believe it's only a 1 or 2 year deal. So who really cares at the end of the day, right? Moving on to the Brooklyn Nets, the super team Brooklyn Nets. I mean, in reality, they were already so good, so much better than the 76ers that it didn't really matter if they made any moves anyway. And yet they still managed to sign Patty Mills, which in my opinion is a pretty huge addition. Some nice offense off of the bench, some nice 3-point shooting. And then they also got Javon Carter. I think that this move isn't really talked about enough. The guy plays some fantastic scrappy defense and also provides some pretty good 3-point shooting once again off of the bench. And they drafted Cameron Thomas, who was just a complete bucket in college. We'll see if he can keep up that production in the NBA. Of course, he may not be getting as much opportunity as, he would have hoped if he'd gone to another team. But regardless, for this team, he should be able to fill in, he should be able to give them productive minutes off of the bench in his rookie season. The third team I'll be talking about today is going to be the Miami Heat. Now, they did, of course, make a relatively big splash landing Kyle Lowry in free agency. Then they also managed to sign, once again, PJ Tucker away from the Milwaukee Bucks. Both of them excellent additions to this team. Kyle Lowry is going to kind of add another dimension to this offense as a whole. He's going to run the offense for them. Once again, going to provide some pretty good defense. Can also get you a couple of buckets as well. And then PJ Tucker, we already know what he can do. A fantastic, versatile defensive piece that can guard pretty much the 1 through 5, even though maybe it's not, the best defense guarding the 5. He still does a pretty good job at doing so. And of course, can just snipe from the 3-point range, especially from those corner threes. They also got Markieff Morris, who's kind of similar to PJ Tucker, where he's a good 3-and-D option. And they managed to re-sign Victor Oladipo on, I believe, a 1-year, $3 million deal, which could be a massive steal if he's able to be even just slightly productive, right? And the final team I'll talk about is going to be the Boston Celtics. Overall, this team didn't get crazy much better, but they still got better. And they made the right moves, in my opinion. Now, it's not listed right here on the depth chart, but they did manage to sign Dennis Schroeder, and I believe he should be starting. I don't know if that's what they're going to do, but I think that he should be the starting point guard for this team. He's going to be a nice playmaker for this team. Which they don't really have a lot of guys that can do that, at least in my opinion. Jaylen Brown has gotten better at passing the basketball over the past couple of seasons, but he's not a guy that you would look at and say, hey, run the offense for me. Whereas Dennis Schroeder has kind of developed into that point guard where you can give him the ball and you can feel comfortable having him run the offense for you if isolation ball isn't really working out, right? They also managed to grab Josh Richardson in free agency, not a massive deal or anything like that, but some solid perimeter defensive play, and just once again kind of adding to this team's depth, which has by far been the biggest issue for them in the past. They also, of course, got Al Horford from the Oklahoma City Thunder after his buyout. Now, he was originally on this team a couple of years ago, and the thing is, he went to the Philadelphia 76ers, and a lot of people said that that's it for the rest of the league. The rest of the league is screwed because Al Horford was pretty much the only big man that was able to, even slow down Joel Embiid whatsoever. Was a fantastic defensive piece for this team, and I think he'll still be able to kind of fulfill that role. Of course, with a couple of years of age on an already kind of old player, he's going to be a little bit worse than he was when he was on this team originally a couple of years ago, but still should once again just be able to add to this team's depth. And a couple of other players that I just want to highlight for their defense is going to be Romeo Langford and Chris Dunn. Both of them have looked good from what we've seen over, let's say, the past 365 days. I think that this is a nice move from them. Overall, once again, literally just adding to their depth, because that has been the biggest criticism from this team over the past, I don't even know how many years it has been depth. And now that they've kind of solved that problem, they are more legitimate contenders than, in my opinion, they have been even in any time within the past 3 to 4 seasons. And now let's talk about the 76ers. They got Andre Drummond in place of Dwight Howard. Groundbreaking, I know. Paul Reed is now going to be getting some more minutes, who I'm actually a huge fan of, by the way. I'm a huge fan of Paul Reed, but regardless, nothing groundbreaking here. They still are rocking with the same pretty much starting 5. Shake Milton's going to be probably their second point guard off the bench. Tyrese Maxey may be getting some minutes, most likely at the backup shooting guard position, and of course the point guard position as well. Nothing huge. This team literally didn't get better, in my opinion, whatsoever. Joel Embiid he played phenomenally on a torn meniscus, but a guy like him who's been injury prone throughout his career and has the physical structure of a player that could be very injury prone in the future, that's not good. His window of dominance may be closing faster than we expect, and the Philadelphia 76ers may not be capitalizing on it quite as well as we would hope. And in all reality, this is what pretty much sparked this entire video, was this graphic right here. When I'm talking about them kind of wasting Joel Embiid's window, this is the stuff I'm talking about. It says the Timberwolves offer D'Angelo Russell, Malik Beasley, and Jaden McDaniels for Ben Simmons per Shams. Now, I checked Shams' Twitter. I did not see anything about this. I don't know how confirmed this is. Maybe he didn't post this on Twitter and instead just talked about this at some point. Maybe wrote an article on The Athletic. I'm not subscribed to them at the moment, so there may be something on there that I haven't seen yet. Regardless, if this is true, this is a terrible move by Daryl Morey. This is an awful move by Daryl Morey. I don't understand what this team is doing. They are valuing Ben Simmons way too highly. You are getting a great starting point guard, at least in this deal, in my opinion, in D'Angelo Russell, a guy that can run your offense a little bit and get you some scoring. Malik Beasley is a phenomenal off-ball 3-point shooting guard, which is a perfect fit for the 76ers team. And then they also got Jaden McDaniels, who in my opinion has proven that he is like what's the word? He can fit basically on every single NBA team in the league. He provides you some good defense at the 4 position, shoots the 3 ball relatively well, and won't get in anybody's way. That is the prototypical great role player that any team can need. And imagine these 3 players for Ben Simmons. If we take a look at this depth chart, they would be starting D'Angelo Russell, Seth Curry, Danny Green, Tobias Harris, Joel Embiid. Then off of the bench, Shake Milton, Malik Beasley, Matisse Thybulle, Jaden McDaniels, Andre Drummond, and then they'd still have Furkan Korkmaz and Paul Reed then getting pushed a little bit further down their bench. That is a phenomenal starting 10, and you still have some pieces here to make trades to upgrade these pieces further. If you wanted to get rid of Danny Green and maybe get a better offensive talent somehow at the small forward position, maybe you package Tyrese Maxey, Danny Green, a couple of picks, Paul Reed, and Furkan Korkmaz for somebody, and you'd still have a phenomenal starting 10 right there. I don't know what this team's doing. They've just been making some absolutely terrible moves. And let's talk about some of the other offers that have been made, some of the other deals that they've walked away from, because it's getting kind of ridiculous. So the Warriors actually were in talks about obviously trading for Ben Simmons, I believe, before the draft. And the 76ers wanted Golden State to give up Andrew Wiggins, James Wiseman, and 4 first-round picks. This is a guy that took, I believe, 3 shots in the fourth quarter for all 7 games against the Atlanta Hawks. All 7. He took 3 shots. And this guy was supposed to be your secondary scorer. This guy was supposed to be your secondary offensive option. And he could not pull through for you whatsoever because his confidence is shot that much. And even if you look at some film, this is a guy that also makes the easy passes. Sure, he averages a lot of assists, but if you actually watch the film, it's not always ridiculous passes. Like it's kind of just dump offs or a drive and kick scenario. It's really basic stuff that, granted, he's still a valuable playmaker, but it's nothing ridiculous that you're saying, oh, I mean, I understand he's not taking a lot of shots, but the ability for him to create for his teammates is insane. That's just not true at this point. It's really just not true, at least in my opinion. Let's look at a couple of other trades. We're just going to talk about these real quickly. I'm kind of glad this trade didn't go through, but my Indiana Pacers apparently offered Malcolm Brogdon and a first-round pick in exchange for All-Star Ben Simmons. I think that's a relatively fair deal. I think that maybe we should have had to give up an additional first or a second or 2, and that would have been it. But other than that, I think that this trade is definitely fair, especially, once again, considering where Ben Simmons' value is at right now. I don't think that this is a crazy deal whatsoever, and yet the Philadelphia 76ers walked away from this knowing that they still have to make a move at some point in order for them to win a championship or compete for a championship at some point. Then they asked I don't know if this is all in order, but these are some of the moves or some of the propositions that have been offered to the 76ers or that have been discussed between 76ers and other teams during this offseason. The Spurs and the 76ers were talking about getting a deal done for Ben Simmons, and the 76ers said that they needed to get 4 first-round picks and 3 pick swaps and a young player from the Spurs in a deal. That is outrageous. That is outrageous. That right there is basically a package that a guy like James Harden would get, which is basically what the Houston Rockets got in return, maybe a little bit more, in order to land James Harden. And you're saying Ben Simmons, who was going to be traded for Harden almost straight up, is worth that much? Not anymore. Maybe a year ago, but not anymore. Moving on, because I think there's one more that I wanted to talk about right here. Right here. Where is it? We already talked about the Warriors, so never mind. They've just been asking for way too much. Daryl Morey is kind of... Daryl Morey's just asking for way too much. He's being, what's the word? He's being stingy. And I think he's just trying to suck up as much value out of Ben Simmons as he can. And in my opinion, it's going to backfire on him at some point. And it looks like it definitely is backfiring on him right now, because just about, I think like 20 days ago, it said Ben Simmons trade rumors. The 76ers are not close to a deal, and it looks like his time in Philly is still in doubt. But a couple of days ago, I believe it was right here. Yes. Ben Simmons is not answering the phone calls. He don't want to be with the 76ers. And from what I heard, he's willing to not report to training camp and will go as long as it takes for him to get out of Philly. That came from Kendrick Perkins 20 days ago. That's not good. That is really not a good sign. If he really does not want to be here, that's not good, because obviously he may be affecting team chemistry. And if he is going to be the guy running your offense, that's definitely not good, because how is he going to be able to run your offense if he's having bad relationships with his teammates, right? Instructing players on the floor, hey, cut to the basket, right? Do you know the tension that can cause, and the ripple effect that it has on the NBA court is not going to be very good once the season comes along. So they have to figure something out quick, because it's just turning into a dumpster fire in Philadelphia. So what do the Philadelphia 76ers need to do? This is what I think they need to do. They need to get a playmaking point guard in exchange for Ben Simmons, and a couple of other assets, depending on what point guard that is. So let's look at some of their potential prospects. You can laugh at me for using 2K ratings. I don't really care. I'm just using this because it's a nice organized way to look at some of the top point guards or top players in the league in an organized fashion. So let's look at the list. Stephen Curry, Luka Doncic won't be available. Damian Lillard is possible, and we'll get back to him in a couple of minutes here. Kyrie Irving is not available. Chris Paul is not available. Westbrook not available anymore. Trey, Shea, De'Aaron Fox, all not available anymore. Jamal Murray is hurt. Drew Holiday is definitely not available after the Bucks won a championship. Ja Morant, LaMelo Ball, those guys aren't available. Mike Conley maybe, but honestly, I don't see the Utah Jazz really wanting him. Lowry just got traded to the Miami Heat. Kemba Walker just got traded to the New York Knicks. Now we're getting to some more guys that could potentially be involved, in my opinion, in a Ben Simmons trade. Malcolm Brogdon, I think that's a possibility. I don't want it to happen because I am a Pacers fan, but I think that's a possibility. John Wall, I think that's a possibility. DeJounte Murray, if they're not asking for 4 first-round picks and 3 pick swaps and a young player, he could potentially be a potential landing spot or a potential target for this team in a Ben Simmons trade. Derrick Rose, maybe not Victor Oladipo. But those guys, those are the guys that I'm looking at most. Derrick Rose, DeJounte Murray, and Malcolm Brogdon, and potentially John Wall. But one other guy that I actually do want to mention is also on my team, TJ McConnell. But let's talk about these 4 first. Malcolm Brogdon, I've already talked about him. This guy averages about 20 points a game and still manages to run an offense for you in a very effective manner. He shot 50, 40, 90 just a couple of seasons ago. And if you put him on a team like the Philadelphia 76ers, where he's not really one of the main guys, as far as scoring goes, if you have Tobias Harris and Joel Embiid ahead of him and he can just kind of focus on running the offense, I think he'll be a ridiculously efficient player, give you a little bit of scrappy defense, even though it's not, the best in the entire world, and be able to run your offense in, once again, a very effective manner. I think that a Malcolm Brogdon trade would be great for this team. Basically what we already proposed to them: Malcolm Brogdon, a first, and then maybe a couple of other draft assets like 2 seconds or a first, or a first and an additional first and a second at the very most. John Wall's a possibility as well. He's looking pretty good right now. The one biggest issue would be floor spacing with him and Embiid, of course. But overall, I probably wouldn't make this trade because of the fact that he's still looking a little bit injury prone, with a guy like Joel Embiid, who kind of wanted a secondary option that will be on the floor as consistently as possible. If he can't space the floor as well, that's kind of another red flag. So this wouldn't be my first move, but it's still a guy that they could look at if they're getting really desperate and need to get Ben Simmons off of the books. DeJounte Murray, kind of another guy that struggles with floor spacing, but I think he'd be a really nice piece for this team. Phenomenal defender as far as, once again, as far as defense goes, can run your offense a little bit. And in reality, that's all you really need him to do. I would like a guy that can create shots for himself better than DeJounte Murray does, and a guy that can shoot the 3 ball well. But if he can still run your offense, I'd be happy with that too, depending on what else you're getting in the trade. The best move, in my opinion, if they can't get Malcolm Brogdon, would be Derrick Rose. I'm not sure how willing the New York Knicks would be willing to trade for Derrick Rose, especially if they're getting Ben Simmons in return, because I'm not sure how well he'd fit for this team. I think, honestly, maybe Tom Thibodeau would do some good for Ben Simmons as far as confidence and mentality goes, but that's not really what we're talking about here. I think that Derrick Rose would be really nice for this team. He's improved a bit as a 3-point shooter, although he's most certainly really not elite in that category. A phenomenal, all around point guard at this point. Honestly, just, obviously, since he's kind of come back and revitalized his career from some of those injury prone years, he's just become a fantastic point guard, can take over a game for you a couple of times if you really need him to. A very consistent piece as well. And if you could get like Derrick Rose, another somewhat young asset, and then maybe a pick, I think that's a fair trade for Ben Simmons, and it would work out well for the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, a guy that I honestly think that this would be a very smart move by the Philadelphia 76ers would be TJ McConnell. Because not only would you be getting TJ McConnell, that he alone wouldn't be enough. If you would get probably a really good draft, like a really good load of draft picks and additional assets besides TJ McConnell, but he would be a phenomenal fit for this team, in my opinion, considering what they need. In reality, in my opinion, they just need a guy that can run their offense. They have enough scoring here besides outside, if you take Ben Simmons out of the equation. Shake Milton has really stepped it up over the past 2 seasons. Seth Curry, phenomenal 3-point shooter, can still give you like 12 to 15 points a game. Danny Green gives you about 10 points a game, as his efficiency and 3-point shooting have kind of declined over the past couple of years. Joel Embiid consistently giving you like 25 to 30 points every single night. It's ridiculous. The guy averaged, I think, like 40 in the playoffs on a torn meniscus. He's been absolutely ridiculous. And Tobias Harris, as basically the third scoring option, has honestly looked great. Averaged borderline, I believe, 20 points a game this season, and could probably average more if Ben Simmons wasn't taking as many shots as he was. But then you get TJ McConnell in here, who does a fantastic job running the offense off the bench. As you can see, average 6.5 assists, provides some extremely scrappy defense, intercepting pretty much any ball that you need, and just constantly getting into the passing lanes. Does a very good job at doing that. A pretty efficient scorer, especially when it comes to attacking the baskets. He's got a deadly floater that I personally love. I really, really love TJ McConnell, as you guys can tell. I think he'd be a nice piece for them because they could get some other assets in return. They could have TJ McConnell kind of running their offense. They get some scoring from these guys in their starting five. They have Shake Milton come off the bench to provide some additional scoring. And then with whatever assets they get in addition to TJ McConnell in a trade, they could combine him with like Tyrese Maxey or Andre Drummond or any other pieces to get even more firepower off the bench. This team is in win now mode. And if they're not, they really need to be, because in my opinion, once again, this window is closing and it is closing quick. So hopefully they make some decisions soon here. This is just kind of it was a bit of a rant today. I don't think that these videos will be structured quite like they were today, where it'll be quite as long or quite as in depth. But I just needed to get some stuff off my chest after seeing some of the decisions and some of the stuff that we're hearing coming out of Philadelphia. It's really getting ridiculous. Overall, that's all I had for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed the first episode of Jump Ball, and I will see you all tomorrow.